Okay, so you have verified your account and you are now in Figma. This is Figma. And you'll see at the top that we have the option for a new design file. This is what we're going to be looking at initially, as well as FigJam. Again, we will not be using FigJam in any way. We are just going to take a quick little tour of the interface. And if you look down here, you'll see they actually have an onboarding. So just stepping through the actual built-in onboarding, you'll see over here we have the ability to write drafts as a design file or a Fig file. We can import other Figma files we may have made previously. In this case, we don't have any. Your drafts are private by default and shareable with other viewers. Here are your teams. Files and teams are accessible by team members and shareable with other editors. If you need some design inspiration, you can explore files and plugins created by the Figma community. That is up here under your user account. You have a community button here. This over here, this is where you can access your settings, remove accounts, and see your Figma profiles. Notifications for your workspace are here in case you have any collaborators and leave you any comments or anything of that nature. So that's essentially the top bar and the side panel here. This is the landing page, essentially your dashboard. Since this is the first time you're coming here, you won't have any files, but you will notice that if you scroll down, they do have a few starter files here that you can start to click through and start to explore. I'm going to start with find the prototyping in Figma file. So here in the prototyping in Figma file, you may be tempted to look around, but if this is your first time here, much like we did on the dashboard page, we have an onboarding here. If this is your first time, you might be seeing a take a quick tour of Figma. And since this is our primary workspace, let's just allow it to do the default walkthrough as it shows us the various tools up here in our toolbar and our layers panel and such. It's very helpful, and if you ever need to find it later, it's typically found here underneath this question mark. So the first thing we're looking at here, this is your constraints button, also known as frames. This will set precise constraints and let you build fluid layouts, support multiple device settings, breakpoints within the same group. All of your layers adjust the way you expect, no magic, get full control. So these are very important, unique to Figma, and we'll be talking about frames as we go through the various tools. Here is your vector networks tool. This is essentially your pen tool. Pen tools have always been scary because they can be very touchy and fragile. Now they are both simpler and more powerful. Paths finally work the way they should. So the pen tool in Figma is actually very intuitive. This here is the comments. If you are working with collaborators, they can actually add comments and pinpoint elements on the UI. They'll show up as this little map icon. You can leave notes right in the design files. You can get feedback, requests, copy updates, where you'll actually use them in the design file and not in an inbox. So here are your comments. Next, over here on the right side panel, you'll see first we have the sharing and permissions button. Sharing your project with teammates, clients, and stakeholders, but don't let them mess up your files. Control their access with granular permissions and manage their access in one simple place. So if you want to share, click this button. You can send people an email, you can invite them and share files that way. And you can control who is an editor and who is a viewer, so who can collaborate on the file and move items around, or who can simply view it. Collaborate in real time with your team and never worry about having your files be up to date. There's no syncing, no waiting, no merge conflicts. This is actually describing the cloud features. So on this one file, I can work on this, but the beauty of this is other teammates in your team can actually work on the same file. And I don't mean they download a file and have a copy on their machine. You are literally both working on the same file at the same time up in the cloud, which makes collaborating very simple. You never have to worry about having the right version and your teammate has another version, then trying to figure out what's the most current version. It's all right here all at once, which is very helpful. This icon right here, this book, this is your team library. Sharing components and styles across your team by publishing them to a team library. Any components that we publish as a library will be found here, where we can essentially just start to drag and drop components into a web page, which once our libraries are established, makes building web pages very fast. Enable quick access to other libraries in this file. You can also share this with other teams. So over here, under Assets and this little book, that's where we're going to look for our components when we get to Components. Export is right here. If you have a few images, whether they be PNGs or JPEGs or SVGs, you can go over to Export. And this is where you can export your designs for use in production or share them with your team. Figma can export PNGs, JPEGs, SVGs, and PDFs. It even gives you the option to export at 1x, 2x, 3x for different resolutions and such, and we'll cover this in greater detail as we move forward. To view your frames on a live device, just download Figma Mirror on your iOS or Android device. They'll update instantly no matter what network you're on, and no need to connect via USB. This was pointed out on a previous video where we were signing up for our account. Figma Mirror is essentially an app that will show you the same view that you would see in a web page, but it'll show you on your phone, so it can be useful for actual prototype on a physical device demonstrations. But outside of that, it actually isn't used for design in any way. It's just to see your design on a phone. So it has limited usage, but they're recommending you take a look at it. So that's Figma Mirror. Over here, if you click on the F, this will be the main menu drop-down. It allows you to go back to your files as well as save, edit, overview. There's a number of controls here and you'll start to become more familiar with them, but this is where you will find particularly back to the main dashboard is here under the F under Files. So this is the file browser. The file browser allows you to navigate through your account. You can access personal files, create and join teams, and connect with a wider Figma community. You can head there by clicking back to Files to the main menu. That is essentially the top toolbars and a little bit of the export. Over here, if we're here on the Layers panel, you'll start to see all of these are actually your layers and your frames, and we can open up all of those, and those are all the components in there. We can step through there, and you can organize your components very efficiently within this structure. Over here, it's a little hidden, but if I see this here, which says prototyping in, if I actually click that, if you open that up, on top of your layers, you'll actually find your pages. You can add additional pages by clicking the plus button. I'm not going to do that at the moment, but this is where you have your pages. Your left-hand panel is layers, assets, and pages. So that's what you should be aware of here. Over on the right side, we have the design, prototype, and inspect. So design is where you have our export, as well as if you were to click on any element, this is where you get a number of controls for height, width, border radius, and we'll step through all that, but this is where you'll have a lot of your primary control over any particular element over here in the design panel. We also have prototype. When you click on prototype, you'll start to see all of these little connections between all the different pieces. And this is actually the user flow diagram. If we zoom in here, you'll start to see arrows and circles. And what this is saying is that when I click on this button, I would like this to lead the viewer, the user here. This is the direction that it's going in. You'll also notice these interesting little icons. This is actually defining the transition state. So if you actually clicked on that, you'd get interaction details. And this, notice the same icon, this is the open overlay transition. If I were to click on, this is the close overlay transition. So this is all of our prototyping sort of aspects and how we can control the flow of our actual prototype. So more on that as we get deeper into prototyping, but it is interesting with this starter file, you can start to see all of these connections. And this is going to be what we're working towards this semester, making a prototype which is interactive and clicks through in a way that is most useful for the user. And finally, over here, we have the inspect panel. And if I click on Inspect Panel, you'll see background color is gray. And it's referring to this, but if I actually click on any particular element, for instance, I'll zoom in here and I will click on this button. If I actually click on that, you'll see that this actually has a bit of a gradient on it. And if I get the actual element over here in the Inspect tool, this is where any developers that you would be working with would come for the essentially the CSS. It gives you just some starter CSS. Often you don't use the positioning in an actual application, but the actual gradient information in this case is very useful to have. Here's the gradient, it goes from this to this, and here's a sample of the CSS that you would want to direct the developer towards. So the Inspect panel will give you the snippets of CSS to hand this off to development. And that is essentially the left and right and top sections of the interface. One more piece over here at the top, this is our present button. Because we are on a demo file that has all of these connections pre-wired, to actually view this prototype, we click on this present button and that will open up a new window. And this is the present view and prototype view. And this is the prototype which that file actually creates. And I will be stepping through this in the next video.